And welcome back to another edition of Transfer Talk. I am joined here with Tyler Gelinas. Tyler, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited. We're in the first week of August, one of the hottest months for sports all around the world right now, especially with soccer. Just got through a couple days of Europa League. Looking forward to Champions League this weekend. And right now, today, we're going to talk a lot about transfers. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Can't complain. Got a little Europa action these past couple days. Looking forward to Champions League on this upcoming weekend. So it's going to be really exciting. A lot to break down. So real quick before we get started, I just want to do my shameless plugs of making sure you guys follow us at the Reserve Squad. We are on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify, and we are now on Facebook. So we have officially created a Facebook page. So make sure you go check us out. Just go in the search bar and just type in the Reserve Squad. We should pop right up with our logo. So be sure you go over there to make sure you're not missing a thing. Another thing that we're going to be doing today is we have a regular agenda as we always do. So we will go over the confirmed transfers. We will also go over some confirmed extensions. And then we will also have our main podcast where we'll go into some major topics around the league. And then we'll also end with our flopper flourish segment as well. So diving into it, I'll just go ahead and just read off some of the confirmed transfers first. We have 5 of the major ones that have occurred. First one being Nathan Aka signed a £41 million deal to join Manchester City. So he's the first signing for Pep Guardiola's, or second signing for Pep Guardiola's team. And the first signing for Pep this year was Ferran Torres, who is a winger in the Spanish league, came over for about £23 million. So he got 2 transfers so far. It's going to be a busy summer, I feel like, for City. So I'm assuming we'll have a lot more than that. We also have Alexis Sanchez over to Inter Milan on a free transfer. Saved United a little bit of wages. Thankfully, that happened. But good for him. I think that's going to be a good deal for him as well. Angel Gomez, a former Man U Academy player, signed to Lille and then also was put on a temporary loan to Portugal for Boa Vista. And then finally, we have Adora Turan. He finally went back home to Galatasaray from Barcelona, and that would also be a free transfer ending his 9 years over at Barcelona. So, Tyler, look real quick, looking at those confirmed transfers, are any of those ones stand out to you?
Yeah, I think the first 3 you mentioned all kind of stood out for different reasons. The first 2, obviously, Manchester City making moves. They bring in Ferran Torres as a replacement for Leroy Sané, and they bring in Nathan Ake as a huge defensive bolster for their team. I know in previous episodes we talked about some things that we would like to see Manchester City do, and beefing up their defense was one of them. I think they've done that, and they've got plenty of cash to spend. And then also with United, often Alexis Sanchez to Ente does free up wages. Who knows if that's going to be enough to bring in Jadon Sancho? We'll see. But those 3 would be the ones that stand out to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so also with the Nathan Aka one, both those transfers actually are pretty good budgetary transfers. None of them completely broke the bank. So I think in terms of adding depth to a squad, Pep Guardiola made some good choices on that regard. So I think that's really great. And he's obviously going to have a couple more transfers that'll come along the lines, but a lot of good deals are kind of in the works. There's been a lot of hot rumors lately, so I'm sure we'll have a couple more good confirmed transfers to go over next week as well.
Yeah, and not only do we talk about the confirmed transfers, but another big part of the summer transfer window is always contract extensions, right? We all see what's going to happen with Willian. We see Aubameyang possibly re-signing with Arsenal one of these days. Hopefully that happens soon. But as far as confirmed contract extensions go, there's a few notable ones that we wanted to share with you guys. Number 1, we have the Sheffield center back, Chris Basham. He extended all the way until 2022. So it's a couple more years for Sheffield's big, strong defense to be able to have Chris Basham back there, which is a huge bonus for them. Also, Burnley's captain, Ben Mee, a big name for Burnley fans. He extended until 2022 as well. So he'll continue to wear the armband for a couple more of the years there. And then for you, Man United, they got a young left back in Brandon Williams. They extended him to 2024 with an option for a 5th year after that. See how that goes, see how he develops. He's obviously a youth academy project, and see what kind of time he gets. Luke Shaw's got some health problems in the past couple of years. So, we'll see how that goes. And then Marc-Andre Ter Stegen's a big name around the goalkeepers in the world. He plays for Barcelona. They got a big contract extension out of him all the way till 2025. That's a big deal for Barcelona, especially the way that their locker room's been. And then the one that I find the most interesting is a young center back, a big promise for the world, Dayu Upamecano. He was a hot transfer commodity product, prodigy, whatever you want to call him, going into this summer. And he signed an extension with Leipzig all the way until 2023, which is huge for Leipzig, especially after they just lost Timo Werner. And I think that that's a really impressive deal for them. So did any of those stand out to you as far as just one specific one where it's just like, wow, what a great deal for that team?
Yeah, I would say for me, the biggest one in that one is Chris Basham, just because that Sheffield team has been together for quite some time. They're probably one of the only teams that's had a close-knit group of players with few going in and out throughout the season. So having, keeping that core defense together when they had such a good year in the Premier League last year, I think is huge. Obviously, Umbo Makado has been a huge transfer target for me. I definitely wanted him at United for a while, so a little bit upset that he signed an extension there, but he's definitely going to do well at Leipzig for sure.
Yeah, Upamecano is the one that stands out the most to me. I think he was wanted by a lot of teams, not only United. There'll probably be a lot of teams around the world that are a little disappointed with his extension, but he's also only 21, and his contract will end when he's 24. So there's still a lot of potential with him. And he actually segues right into one of our main topics today. What we're going to be doing, something a little bit different over the next couple weeks. We've been talking a lot about English Premier League teams and a lot about Champions League and different things over the past couple weeks. What we're going to do is we're going to pick a league. This week's going to be the German League, and we're going to talk about the top 3 teams from that league. Next week will be the Italian League, and we'll go on from there. For the next couple weeks, we'll talk about the top 3 teams. We'll break them down. We'll talk about where they are, how their seasons were, what we want to see from them over the course of the summer, and how they can take whatever their next step may be moving into next season. And so the reason Upamecano is a perfect segue is because this week, like I said, it's going to be about the Bundesliga, the German League, and Leipzig. They were 3rd place this past season. And they had a lot of different things happen, right? Obviously, Timo Werner leaves. That's a huge deal. They do bring in Hee-chan Hwang. He was a forward for Salzburg. He's South Korean, kind of supposed to be the next Son, if you will. So he's got huge potential, and obviously with the roster that they already have. So I'll kind of turn that over to you as far as Leipzig goes and kind of ask, what's your analysis on Leipzig? Where do you feel about them, and how do you see them moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. So Leipzig are definitely going to have a little bit of a struggle year, I feel like. When you have a guy like Timo Werner who covers a lot, like I know we always talk about the heat maps, but he covers so much ground. He scores a shit ton of goals. And basically with that, I mean, that's just a hard guy to kind of replace, I mean, he's such a good quality player. So I think the biggest thing for me, one of the areas that I could see them wanting to improve is I don't think they absolutely need to have another good striker, because they do have some good talent up there. But I think for me personally, someone that I would like to see at Leipzig is someone like a Luka Jovic. I know, for example, we talk about him and how he flopped at Real Madrid, but I feel like he would be a good loanee, because I don't think Leipzig need to purchase him from Real Madrid. But I feel like he's got that German background with him at Frankfurt, and I think that would translate well with him, trying to find a new spark in Leipzig. So if I were Leipzig, I would be trying to see if they could figure out a loan deal. I know that they're keen on selling him, so that might cause a few issues. And Leipzig aren't really the team to break the bank. So I think if they could secure a loan deal for a Luka Jovic, that's probably a big area that I could see improvement. Another one, and then this is one that I don't think that they need to break the bank for, but another central midfielder, just to add a little bit more depth to the squad, just so they can last over a couple games. And someone that I think would be a good person for that would be Bakayoko. I think that he would partner really well. He's strong. He's a great holding midfielder, and I think that adds a little bit more depth to allow players like Forsberg to push up a little bit further. So I think that would probably be the two that I would look at the most. What about you? What do you assess with Leipzig's season this year?
Yeah, so I think, first and foremost, I kind of want to address a little bit for those who don't know what Leipzig's roster really looks like. Obviously I watch a lot of German football. I have a little bit of background on what they do, how they play, and their manager, Julian Nagelsmann, is an absolute genius when it comes to soccer. He's one of the up-and-coming managers that you're going to hear a lot about in the future. But when you look at their forwards, they've got guys like Poulsen. He kind of is the guy with the hair bun, looks like Ronaldinho a little bit. He's got a gritty little play about him. I mentioned the South Korean that they brought in. They also have Marcel Sabitzer. He's an Austrian player. He can play forward. He can play midfield. He's a little bit versatile. Might be a name that some people recognize. And then where their strength, though, is in their midfield a little bit and their defensive backs. So in the midfield, you mentioned Emil Forsberg. He's a great attacking player. I believe he's Swedish. He's a name that most people around the world of football should recognize. He's a quality, creative player. They also have Kevin Campbell and Nkunku. Both of them can hold it down really well in the midfield. And from a USA perspective, there's a young one there named Tyler Adams. He's a great holding midfielder, kind of similar to Weston McKennie, who plays for Schalke. There's quite a few American players in the Bundesliga to begin with, but Tyler Adams is worth mentioning when you talk about Leipzig. And then obviously Upamecano, Konate, and Klosterman, 3 very, very, very strong, talented defensive players. And the unique thing about Leipzig's roster is there's a lot of versatility there. Nagelsmann it allows him to be creative. I've seen them run multiple different formations. I've seen them run 5 in the back, 3 in the back, a 4-4-1. There's a lot of different things that Leipzig can do. So I think it's worth mentioning what their squad looks like before I give my analysis on where I feel like they can get better. And I 100% agree with you when you mentioned Bakayoko in the midfield. Just one more depth position player for me in the midfield is key, because the way Leipzig's going to have to play this year without Werner, they're not going to have that forward that can really hold up the play a ton. So they're going to have to work the ball and build up the play through the midfield a lot more. And I think they're going to need some depth and some creativity in there. Forsberg can't do it all himself. So I think bringing in someone like Bakayoko would fit their physical style of play perfectly, and it really would help to frustrate teams. And then when they do get into the attacking third, hopefully this young South Korean kid can really prove himself. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at some guys like Poulsen or Sabitzer to be able to finish off the ball. And I think that's where I come in as well. I think you mentioned Luka Jovic. That's a huge benefit for them. For me, I'm not sure Jovic is the answer, but I do think they're going to need to bolster their attack even more so, because you can't just replace Timo Werner with one prodigy from South Korea and who played at Salzburg. I think you're going to need a little bit more than that. Whether you loan someone or bring in some experience like an Edinson Cavani or something, he's been linked to a lot of different teams. I think you got to have experience in that locker room moving forward, because they're going to go through some adversity next year.
For sure. And I think you bring up a good point. And one of the things with Leipzig is they do have quite a few players that are flexible in terms of the position that they can play. Klosterman, for example, is one of those players. He came up originally as a left back, but he's tall, he's strong. He also has the figure to be able to hold a center back role. So when they do run to that wing back setup, he's able to pinch in from a left back also to a center back situation. You mentioned Upamecano, and Kanote is another big one that they have, which is a solid young player there too. So I think that one of the big things for me too, though, is since they always are changing their defensive shape quite a bit in order to adapt to the game, like you mentioned. Angelino is one player that's going to be going back to Manchester City. So, they could also use a little bit more depth in terms of their backs. And since Klosterman is so flexible, and I believe he's left-footed, I think having him on the left side is good, but maybe they could use a little bit more strength in terms of maybe another depth player at right back. Another player that I was looking at is Max Aarons.
Yes.
Very, very pacey. He's quick. Norwich got relegated, so you fancy him to go to a different club and look somewhere else. I'm not sure if he's too keen on moving outside of England, but I think he would be a great fit there. He's pacey. He's a good wing back. He can cross the ball. I think it plays into their wing back situation. So if he could, learn from an Upamecano or a Kanote and just learn a little bit more defensive style, I think he could be a great player in the future. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Bayern were also looking at him at one point too.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Max Aarons is being looked at by a lot of teams, a lot of big teams, right? But if he goes to a team like Bayern Munich, he's not going to play very often, right? Maybe if injuries happen, he'll get some time. Whereas if he goes to somewhere like Leipzig, they're a pretty strong team, but they're not a Bayern Munich, and they're trying to get there so that they can compete with Bayern Munich. And he's a guy that's going to be able to get a lot of minutes at a place like Leipzig. And I think that's an excellent suggestion. Out of any suggestion we've made recently, I think that's one of my favorite ones. He would be a perfect fit for the style that they play, and something that Nagelsmann should look for.
For sure. And I think one thing too, though, the only con I would say probably to Max Aarons, because I do think that he would be a great fit at the club. But the only one thing that you could kind of counteract that with is that he was playing for Norwich, and granted they don't have the best surrounding team around him. So his form may not have looked as great, but I think that partnered with the better players around him, and if he can improve his defensive capabilities, I think he'd be a great fit at any other club.
Right. And then to add one more point to it, too, I think when we think about looking forward to next season, what Leipzig has to look at, they had a great first half of the year. After the restart of COVID, it was a little tough on them, and then they lose Timo Werner. They just need to kind of weather the storm a little bit. And when they've got a team like Borussia Mönchengladbach right behind them, right on their heels, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to remain in that top three. I actually foresee Mönchengladbach passing them next year. So if you're Leipzig, you just got to focus on keeping a Champions League, Europa League qualifier spot, and that's going to be what determines their success next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of segues into our point here. We also have another team that we're going to break down. We'll break down team number 2. So we'll start off with that one. We have Borussia Dortmund. They play second. There are a ton of things to unpackage with this team. So, Tyler, I'll just start off with you. There's a lot to unbox here. Give us your take right now.
Yeah, Borussia Dortmund is a very interesting team. For years ago, they were really competitive with Bayern Munich for that top spot. And over the last few years, it's been a little bit of a runaway for Bayern. And I think Dortmund's finally starting to turn that corner again and get back to being at a competitive level. The point spread was still a little bit this year, a few games, it is what it is. But they've got the right pieces in play. And I think, they're there. And, all it takes is one little misstep from Bayern and they're on their heels and causing pressure. And that's exactly, I talk about Leipzig's success being determined on whether or not they make Champions League or Europe. Well, Dortmund's success is determined on whether or not they challenge for the title. This has been 8 years in a row that Bayern's won, and it's time for Dortmund to step up and make it more competitive. Not only for all viewers, but for fans of Dortmund and everybody in the world of football in general. And when you look at this team and their roster, they are slam-packed full of attacking power. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. Some of the players that they have on their attacking side, you've got guys like Marco Reus, right? They bring in Haaland. They have Sancho. If he leaves, they're thinking about replacing him with Memphis Depay. We'll talk about that later. They've got Eden Hazard's brother, Thorgan Hazard. They've got Julian Brandt, one of the better young attacking German players. And that's just in their attacking realm. I didn't even mention the young American kid, Gio Reyna. He's got some talent too. And then you look at their midfield. They've got strong midfielders who know the game, who play very smartly, with guys like Axel Witsel, Dahoud, Thomas Delaney. He's a physical presence with that team. He gets yellow cards all the time, but he plays very strong, and it causes problems for other teams' midfields, especially if it's a team that's trying to be creative. It can really hold them up. And then when you look at their defense, they got experience in Mats Hummels, who he's played for Bayern. He's played for Dortmund. He's gone back and forth a few times. He knows the Bundesliga very well. He's a World Cup winner. He's a champion. They have no issues with Berkey in their goalkeeping range, and they've got outside backs that can be versatile, whether they want to play wing back, up front, or however it may be. If there was one weakness, I would have said right back, but they just brought in Thomas Meunier a couple weeks ago. So you look at this roster, there's maybe one or two pieces missing. If I had to make a recommendation, I would say bring in one more center back to help out Mats Hummels. They've got Akanji. He's young. He's good. But I think one more very solid center back for them would be perfect. Someone like how Manchester City went and grabbed Nathan Ake. They need to be able to do the same thing for Borussia Dortmund and bring someone in to help that defensive line, because there's absolutely no problem going on with their offense. Even if they lose Sancho, I think they'd be fine. Even if they didn't bring in Memphis Depay, they still have attacking presence. And Haaland was absolutely on fire. He was putting goals in the back of the net at will. So I think that as a Bayern fan, Dortmund's the one team that I'm really afraid of, just because I don't know how any team is really going to be able to defend them. You can't possess an attack; they're going to counter you. You can't back up because they're going to have creativity in the offensive third. So you just kind of have to go on the attack against this Dortmund team too. Very exciting to watch. A lot of high-scoring games. Anyone who has ESPN or ESPN Plus going into next year, I highly recommend turning on some Dortmund games because they're fun to watch.
Yeah, a ton of fun. And I mean, there's just a lot of fun when you're watching that attacking team. And so I guess, obviously there's a lot of rumors around Jadon Sancho leaving. So say Jadon Sancho leaves. Do you think Memphis Depay is the answer? Do you think that they need to go out and get a striker or a winger?
It's a tough question. I don't think they need to. I think need is a strong word. I also didn't think Manchester City needed to replace Leroy Sané. But when you look at Dortmund specifically, I mentioned Thorgan Hazard. I mentioned Julian Brandt. Those are both guys that can play in the middle. They can play on the outside. I think the reason you go after someone like a Memphis Depay is because he's experienced. He's played well. He's played for Manchester United. He's having phenomenal seasons at Lyon in the French league. And you look at a guy like Marco Reus, he's kind of injury prone. I mean, he gets injured quite a bit. It's sad to say. He's my favorite player. I wish he would stay healthy because he's fun to watch. But you can't lose Sancho and have another year of Reus injuries without bringing in someone to help that attack a little bit, even if you have a Thorgan Hazard or a Julian Brandt, because you need those guys to be versatile and be able to move into the middle if they need to. So I do think it would be smart to get a natural winger in Memphis Depay to be able to just have some extra depth in a position where you have someone that can support Haaland up front in case Reus goes down and Sancho leaves. However, if Sancho doesn't leave, Depay doesn't show up, and they run a front three with Reus, Haaland, and Sancho, that's scary business when they're healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so I guess let's end it then on this one. Do you think Jadon Sancho leaves?
I do. I think Manchester United they really have their heart set on him. and I think for the right price, Dortmund would let him go. The most recent rumors we're seeing is for 120 million. Yeah, I don't know how much offhand that they brought Jadon Sancho in for, but I know it wasn't anywhere near that.
£1 million.
Yeah, so they're going to profit huge, just like they always do. That's kind of Dortmund's business model. They're, in my opinion, the best youth scouting team there is, and they turn those youth prodigies into profit, and that's how they make their money. And Jadon Sancho is no exception. You look at in the past, Lewandowski was a striker that was there. Look what he's doing at Bayern Munich. When Lewandowski left, they reloaded with Aubameyang. Look what he's doing at Arsenal. Aubameyang left. Now they're reloaded with Haaland. It's literally like reloading the gun when it comes to Dortmund. And Jadon Sancho is just going to be the next one that leaves. And if they replace him with Memphis Depay, that's great. But they've got Giovanni Reina, who's going to eventually become that guy, in my opinion, and be the next prodigy who is in that right side. Pulisic was there before too. So they know what they're doing. I have faith that Dortmund's executives will make the right call regardless. And if you get 120 million paying for Memphis Depay is nothing. And I think they're going to challenge Bayern Munich this year, and that's not easy for me to say.
For sure. And I think Memphis Depay is, and when I saw those rumors, that was probably like the rumor that I saw where I thought that was actually a perfect fit. Because Memphis is still relatively young. I think he's in his prime. He's like 27, 28, I believe, maybe a little bit younger than that.
Yeah.
So he brings a little bit more seniority to that team because that team is relatively young. You know, they
Very
always
young.
They always have young talent that's kind of coming and going with that team. But I mean, obviously, if they're able to sell Sancho for 120 million, I mean, Memphis is probably going to be at tops 50, I would say.
Yeah, 40, 50.
So I mean, that also gives them 70 million to work of wiggle room to work with in getting young players. And so I know that you mentioned that they could probably get some depth center backs. I don't think they need to go out and purchase anybody crazy. If I were them, I think that they could go in, and they're very good at identifying youth. So I think that this would be a good opportunity for them to go out and seek a center back that's relatively young that they could kind of mold into the team. I mean, you have Dortmund is one of the teams that they're able to train young talent very well and set them up properly for that next stage. And even more so that they're able to make that team a contender and always competing with Bayern because of that. So I think that they could probably go in with another youth center back that they could transition into the team and eventually move up. And I think that's probably the more cost-efficient way that they could do, especially with them bringing in Jude too, who also has in that central midfield with Axel Witsel. So I think they have pretty good depth. So I would say probably the biggest thing for me is definitely would be Memphis Depay if they were to offload Jadon Sancho, but I don't think they need to.
Yeah, Jude Bellingham's a good one too. He came in over the recent weeks. He's going to add that depth to the midfield as well. Like I said, I think if there's one spot, it's going to be center back. They don't need to get anyone specific, like you said. That's not a huge name, but I would like to see some more depth in their defense because that's what needed the most work when it came down to it. I mean, they could score goals, but they also got scored on. There's one other name worth mentioning for those of you that enjoy youth prodigies. Yusufu Mukoku, I think is how you pronounce it. You may be able to correct me on that. The kid is like 15 years old, and he's been playing in the under-19 teams. He's going to get his chance to make his senior team debut, I believe, when he turns 16 here this year. Watch out for this one. He is a huge prodigy. Like, he's going to be a big-time stud, and he'll be eventually playing for the likes of a Real Madrid or someone. But watch his development under Dortmund. If you haven't heard of him, look it up. It's Moukoko, Mukoku. His highlights are fun to watch.
You heard it first here. This kid is going to be a stud. Tyler and I have been tracking this guy for a while, and it's looking like he's going to make his first team debut this year, which is going to be exciting.
Yeah, very, very excited. But anyways, that's Dortmund. We unpacked Dortmund quite a bit there. I do think that they're going to challenge Bayern, and that brings us to the champions, Bayern Munich, right? And when you look at this squad, I mean, I have a very strong knowledge of Bayern Munich. I follow them. That's my team. And they really, there's not very many holes to fill in Bayern Munich's roster. If anything, they've got some players sitting on the bench that could be very, very, very useful in other places. But with that said, I'm curious. I know most people probably know what my take is on Bayern, so I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so for me, Bayern are pretty set pretty much across in terms of their starting lineup. And I do think that they could add a few depth players, but we'll kind of break that down a little bit. But one of the benefits to Bayern is that they are a very flexible team. A lot of the players can play multiple positions. You have David Alaba on the back who can play center back as well as outside back. I know there's a little bit of rumors as to whether he's going to leave or not, but I personally think he's just kind of playing the field just to see what's out there and kind of pressure them into getting a better deal. Rightfully so. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the world. But I think for me with Bayern, since they have so many flexible players, they do have good depth. They are able to rotate the team pretty well. The biggest thing for me is I think that they should go for a backup striker. Robert Lewandowski is their main goal scorer. He scores a lot. He doesn't get injured too often, but, the man does need a break. And, gosh forbid, he does go down for whatever reason. I know that they have Muller, who can also play back there, and they're pretty versatile. But I do think that they could get another young another young striker, preferably one that matches Lewandowski's style, right? Like he's a target man, he's a poacher, he's like the full forward package. Not the fastest striker, but he's still fast enough to get around. So I think that would be another good profile. I know we mentioned like a Luka Jovic would be another good player that I think would do pretty well over there. But problem is he's going to want to start. So I don't think a player of his caliber would work necessarily at Bayern. But that type of player is someone who I think that would work pretty well. But if I'm Bayern, I think you guys don't need to really there's not a ton of holes that you need to fill. So I think the only holes that you'll have to fill are players that might leave. And the two players that are probably of note that are looking at leaving are David Alaba and Thiago. So I guess real quick, before we dive in a little bit further, what do you think is going to happen with Alaba and Thiago?
It's tough, right? So those are two of my favorite players. I'll start with Thiago. I think he's one of the most creative, if not the best possession center mid in the game. I've seen him play attacking mid. I've seen him play defensive mid. I've seen him play box to box. And I've watched him make fools out of other midfielders for years. It's just incredible to see the passes that he can make and what he does on the ball. He's had a little bit of injury issues the last year or two, but he is back. The biggest difficulty for him is the development of Leon Goretzka and the move of Joshua Kimmich to the midfield, and Muller being successful in the assist leader. Right, it's very tough to get into Bayern's midfield. If you think about a guy like Corentin Tolisso, I don't remember the last time he played, and he's on Bayern's squad. Not a lot of people even remember that. He's just a very solid center mid. It's just so difficult to get in that midfield. And then so difficult to the point where we're talking about, can Thiago start? Like, are you kidding me? So I do think he's going to leave. He's been very vocal on wanting to leave. It's nothing against Bayern. He's just, at this point, he has won everything there is to win with Bayern. I believe he was part of that Champions League winning squad back in the day. I don't remember if he was there that year. I may be wrong on that. Pep may have brought him in afterwards, but he's won all the years he's been there over the last 7 or 8 years that we've been on this winning streak. He's been there, and he's incredibly gifted, and he's at that age where he needs to decide, I'm either going to stay at Bayern Munich for pretty much the rest of my career, or I'm going to move on and try something different. And I think for him, he wants to try something different, and I respect that. I know Liverpool is the biggest rumored club out there. Personally, I would like to see him go to Manchester United. I think he'd be a better fit there. But we'll see what happens. I do think Thiago's out. And when you talk about David Alaba, he's the most versatile player in the world, in my opinion. I've seen him play left back at a very solid status, if not arguably the best left back for many years. This past year, he moves over to center back because we had injury issues, and instantly was the best center back on the team. Which is saying a lot when you're a team with the caliber of Bayern Munich. And then I've also seen him play central midfield with his country, Austria. So I've literally seen him do it all. The man is a free kick specialist, incredible to watch. And he is demanding, Lewandowski money, Thomas Muller money, Manuel Neuer money. And I do think he deserves it. I just think it's tough with the timing. Finances are a little low with COVID. There were some moves made last season that Bayern, they spent a little bit bigger than they usually do for a guy like Lucas Hernandez. And I'm just not sure that they're willing to pay him that much. And I don't know how negotiable that is for him. So I ultimately think they're going to come to an agreement. I think my prediction would be that Thiago leaves and Alaba stays. I really, really hope that Alaba stays. He, like I said, is one of the most versatile players, one of my favorites, and I can't really imagine our squad without him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you guys have to get Alaba. I mean, like you said, he is literally the most versatile player. He can play any position on the field, probably except striker, just because he probably doesn't have that striker mentality. But anywhere on the wing he can play, whether it's midfield, defensive. I think he's definitely a solid player. And I think he's just kind of holding out at this point just to see what they're willing to do. But I think he ultimately will sign with Bayern because I just can't see him going to a different club at this stage. At least not going to a club where he wouldn't be as successful at Bayern, where he's currently at. So to
Right.
me, that's probably the biggest piece. So then I guess when you assess Bayern's team, we talked about the players that'll potentially leave. I gave a quick 2 seconds on some positions that I think that they could fill in some depth in terms of some bench players. Where do you think the holes are at Bayern, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it pretty well with as far as depth at the striker position goes. I think a guy that I would look forward to help Lewandowski out would be Weghorst. He plays for Wolfsburg right now, and I believe he was in the top 5 for scoring in the German league. So if we could bring him over, that would be great. But that's obviously an ideal, utopia situation. That's not really going to happen. What I want to see happen in the future is for Haaland to follow in his footsteps and go from Dortmund to Bayern Munich when Lewandowski is ready to go. But again, I don't know that that's going to happen. And we do have a young kid there named Xerxes, and I've seen him play, and he plays really well. So I don't know that Bayern needs to go out and buy anyone. Now, if we do lose someone like Thiago or we lose someone like David Alaba, especially Alaba, then maybe go and get someone to beef up some depth areas there. I know right back's been a position we've been trying to add depth to since we moved Kimmich to the midfield. Right now, all we really have is Pavard there. We had Odriozola on a 6-month loan, but he went back now. So I think if Bayern does anything, it's going to be a loan move. And I think it's important to note there's going to be some guys that leave, some guys that you've seen in previous years, like Javi Martinez. I think he's going to be gone. I don't know what's going to happen with Corentin Tolisso. I don't know what kind of playing time he's going to get. Is he happy with where he's at? Coutinho is going to be out. We had him on loan for Barcelona. And then I'm not sure what's going on with Perisic. I think he's going back to Ente as well because we're just not in a position to fund someone like that. However, that being said, the starting lineup that we have, especially bringing in Leroy Sané, is absolutely incredible. And I talk about Leipzig's and Dortmund's expectations of next year. Dortmund's going to try to challenge for the German title. Leipzig's going to try to stay in Europe. Bayern Munich's in a position where it's pretty much Champions League or bust. And that's kind of where it's been for the last couple years. And we made semifinals quite often. And last year we were disappointed in the quarterfinals or the round of 16, I think, when we lost to Liverpool. This year we're sitting in a pretty good position going into it this weekend, and I've got high hopes. So not only for this year, but moving into next year, it's a position where it's Champions League or bust for Bayern Munich, and that provides a lot of pressure. That's not always good for the team. But for me, I think you're right. I think just beefing up depth is all Bayern can really do. But let me ask you this. So we talked about the German league in general, specifically Leipzig, Dortmund, and Bayern. And over the years, Lewandowski has dominated the German league Golden Boot. He's always scored the most goals. It doesn't matter if Timo Werner's been right behind him or Aubameyang or whoever. Haaland came into Dortmund and scored 13 goals in like 15 games. Do you think Haaland is going to challenge Lewandowski for the Golden Boot next year?
Ooh, I think he is, man. I mean, dude, his first game, he came off the bench and scored a hat trick.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
That is just unbelievable. So, I think that's going to be exciting to see. And I think the difference between a Haaland and a Lewandowski is Haaland has the pace, man. So he's got the physical nature to him. He's brilliant in terms of his runs. He is a workhorse just like Lewandowski. I think the one major separator from them is that Haaland is pacey. But on the flip side, Lewandowski is also solid in the air, whereas Haaland has not scored a header with either team that he's been with this season. He's 6'1", he's 6 foot, maybe 6'1", so he is pretty tall. He definitely could win in the air. He just hasn't won so far in the air. So I think what it's ultimately going to come down to is that's a tough one. I like that one. That's a really tough one.
I threw that curveball at you.
I think Lewandowski will win it just because I think they do have the better side around him, and they do have better players that can feed him the ball. I think that the problem that you have with Haaland is that, like I said, he's not good in the air, so you kind of have to play that ticky-tack pass in that final third in order to do so. So I think that it's more advantageous to Bayern because they have the flexibility of doing crosses as well as doing that ticky-tack pass in the final third. So I think that it will be Lewandowski. I do think Haaland will be a close second and definitely give him a little bit of a challenge. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be Lewandowski up top.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious. I think Haaland's going to be right there with him. I think it's going to be a neck-and-neck race, more so than it's been in a while. The last guy to really, really be neck-and-neck with him was Aubameyang. And I think Haaland's going to be that guy. Now, I think there is a time coming in the next year or two where Haaland's going to be there and pass him. It's just going to be what happens. Lewandowski's aging. But Dortmund's style of play fits into Haaland's style of play. They're very ticky-tacky in the third, offensive third. They don't always go for the headers, even on the ground crosses. And Haaland's shot, man, it's just heavy. It's got a ton of power. I'm very excited to see. So that's something that I will be looking forward to in terms of the German league. One other thing I'm going to look forward to for Bayern Munich is what happens in the goalkeeper situation. Neuer's obviously the man there, but we did bring in Alexander Nubel from Schalke, and I believe in his contract he's guaranteed. I want to say it's 8 games, but it's a small amount of games that he's guaranteed. I'm not sure how happy Neuer was about that, but that's another situation where we've got an aging player and someone to replace him. And I'm curious to see how he does, because that's kind of what our future is going to look like. So if you're a Bayern fan or any just a fan of soccer in general and you didn't know some things, the race between Lewandowski and Haaland, and then the situation with the goalkeeper, the young kid coming in at Bayern Munich, are 2 things that I would be looking out for as we watch more of these German league games this season.
Is he your man when Neuer retires?
Yeah. I mean, I think he is. I think so. I think he's pretty much following in Neuer's footsteps from what I've been impressed from the little bit that I've seen him. But again, it's something I want to see happen when he does get those games, how he plays, how he commands the defense, and what his style is. Because I've been so used to Neuer's commanding captain presence and sweeper keeper style that I'm curious to see how a new face fits in, because Sven Ulreich has never really been my confident answer.
Do you think this guy comes out as much as Neuer does?
I don't know. So far, no. I don't think anyone does. So I think he'll be a little bit more reserved than Neuer, but we'll see what happens.
Cool. All right, well, that breaks down the top 3 German teams. So let us know your thoughts. Are there any players that we missed, any holes that we maybe didn't cover here? If there's anything that you have for us, let us know in the comment section below. But with that, we're going to go ahead and we'll transition over to flop or flourish. So if you guys aren't familiar with this segment, it is our staple at the end of our show, and it's basically where we take 5 upcoming transfer rumors, or sometimes they're confirmed deals, and we discuss whether we think the deal is going to be a flop or a flourish. So we'll dive right into it, and we're going to start with an interesting one that kind of that's going to be a little bit overseas a little bit. So we have Luis Suarez from Barcelona rumored to go to the MLS at Inter Miami. Tyler, what do you think about this one? Do you think it'd be a flop or a flourish?
I don't know, man. What do you think the Americans would do if they got bit by a soccer player? I mean, I'm just kidding. I don't foresee that happening. For me, it's hard to not say flourish, just because Luis Suarez has so much talent, and going to the MLS, I think he's just going to score goals. But I actually don't like this move. I think that it's a little too soon for him. I know David Beckham's trying to bring a big name in for Miami and really get that club going. But I think Luis Suarez has another year or 2 left somewhere a little bit better than the MLS. And by no means do I mean any disrespect to the MLS. It's a great league. But for me, it's more about respect for Luis Suarez. And I know I think he's 33 now. I think he could play another year or 2 at a team like a Sevilla or a Villarreal or like a lower level Spanish team that's lower than Barcelona and Atletico and Real Madrid, and get a few more years there before he moves on to a place like the MLS. In saying that, I do think the MLS is a better fit for him than somewhere like Asia. And if he does come, I would love to see him in Miami with David Beckham and see what that develops into. So ultimately, if he does come over, I would say he flourishes as a player, but I don't think it's the most flourishing move that he can make.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have a different take on that one. So I would actually say this one's a flop. And the reason why I say it's a flop is because Inter Miami are kind of going through a lot of kinks of just being a new club in general. And so I think that in the club as an organization, there's just a little bit of hierarchy issues that they're having, just structure things, all general things that a new club goes through. And so I guess when I look at this from Luis Suarez's perspective, it's kind of tough to go to a club that doesn't exactly have their structure in place, doesn't have defined processes. So especially when you go to a big structure at the Catalan club, with Barcelona, and then you go to Inter Miami, and then, the structure's not exactly there. I don't think it would be the best environment for him. I mean, obviously he would score goals in the MLS. It would be a flourish in that sense. But I think that in terms of just how the team is structured and, the timing for Luis Suarez, I think that would be a little bit of a flop. I do think he could play another year at Barcelona if he wanted to, but I also think that he wants to go to a place where, he's still going to get good visibility. And that's where I think the MLS would be a more successful place for him, at least, as he starts to get into the later years of his career. But I do think he'll move to the MLS will benefit him at some point. I just don't think Inter Miami is the team at this moment.
Interesting.
So moving on here, we'll move on to Joshua King is being rumored to go from Bournemouth over to Brighton since Bournemouth got relegated. Flop or flourish for you?
I like that. I go with flourish on this one. The reason I say is Josh King, he's a name that was very relevant a couple years ago, and when Bournemouth was having their great success, and then they kind of fell off, and Brighton's one of those teams where they're just they're Brighton, right? They're that like middle of the table team. They need, in my opinion, they're one of those teams that needs a spark to be able to take that next step. And I think for him, it would be a second chance, and for them, it would be an opportunity for a spark. So I think it's a good match. I'd like to see some more goal scoring out of Brighton in general anyways. So I go flourish on that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, because Brighton are making some pretty good moves. They just signed Alan Lallana. If they could also snag a good player in Josh King, I'm pretty sure there's another player that they just got that I can't think of off the top of my head. But Brighton's making some pretty good moves. They were pretty close on the cusp of being relegated, and I think Josh King and Adam Lallana are definitely two good additions to the squad. So I definitely think that would be a flourish as well. But that was a very exciting transfer, and sad for Bournemouth that they're going to be losing him. But Brighton are a good team, and I think that he should be in the Premier League. And they also have Mbappé up top. He's a good player too, so I think Josh King would partner with him well. But overall, I think that would be a flourish too, and it would be exciting to see Josh King still in the Premier League. This is an interesting one. This one kind of puzzled quite a few people, including myself. I truthfully did not expect this to happen, but what do you make of Chris Smalling's return to Manchester United? So he's going to be at United. Do you think him staying at United for the next year is a flop or a flourish?
It's a flop. I mean, I think it could be beneficial in terms of maybe putting some pressure on Lindelof to perform a little better. But I don't think that Maguire or Lindelof are really going to lose that starting role anytime soon, especially to Chris Smalling. Again, I don't dislike Chris Smalling. There's a reason he was loaned to Roma in the first place. And I actually think he fit better at Roma than he does at United. I think his talent, his quality of play fits Roma really well. Roma are a team that often challenges for that qualifying position in the Italian league for Champions League and things like that. And I think that all around, it just made more sense that a deal got made to extend the loan or even make it permanent. And it didn't seem to come to fruition. I think, like you said, it kind of had a lot of people scratching their heads with it on that one, including myself. So I don't like the move for him coming back to United. I'd say flop because he's probably not going to get a lot of playing time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I want to say the reason why I think that he's bringing – I know that in the first place, United wanted a permanent deal. They wanted an extension to the loan, and they wanted to keep him on loan. So, it feels like United were just trying to stiff arm them into a permanent deal, which, they ultimately didn't do. But the only thing that I can think of for them bringing back Smalling is to create a little competition for Lindelof, maybe to see if he'll improve his form a little bit. That's probably the only thing that I could think of. But, I mean, I agree with you. There was a reason why he flopped at United. His form wasn't exactly suited for the Premier League. He wasn't playing too well under United, and that's why he got the loan spell out to Roma. And not only that, he did very well at Roma. He earned a very good spot there. He was very decisive in his defensive decision making. So, it's one of those things where I'm not sure if they're bringing back Smalling in order for them to make more competition for Lindelof. But I do know that the Sancho deal is looking pretty likely. So if I had to guess, I bet the Sancho deal is all United will really be able to afford this summer. And so I think that they know that they need to bolster their center back. So I think that's why they're bringing Smalling back. But I think for Smalling in general, I think that would be a flop. So just not disappointed to see him back. Obviously, he's a good player. I'd like to see him at United. But in terms of his career, I think it would have definitely been a more suited flourish at Roma. All right, moving on to the next one. We have Serge Aurier from Tottenham, rumored to go to AC Milan for £23 million. Flop or flourish?
Flourish. I really like this move. I think it's a mirror move to what Dortmund did with Meunier. And I think it's a position that Milan needs to fill and a position that Aurier fits very well. And Milan's a team that, again, they're another team they're sixth place. They're trying to get up there. Historically, they've been one of the most incredible teams in all of the world of soccer. and they need to make moves to get themselves back up into relevance. And I think they're doing the right things. They're putting pieces together, and I think Aurier is a solid piece, and he'll fit very well into the Italian-style defensive play that you see in Serie A.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's their defense is probably the one area that they could use a decent amount of improvement in. They have decent center backs. They're pretty good up top. They have Zlatan up there. They have a couple good young players. They have John Aruma in the back. So I do think that defense is an area that they need to bolster. So I would also say this is a flourish. And for me, I just think it's tough to be in the Tottenham dressing room right now. I really don't have anything good to say about Jose Mourinho and his coaching style, just because obviously I've seen it. I know a couple of my buddies have seen it in other clubs, and I just truthfully don't believe he's a good dressing room manager from that sense. So I think it's a flourish for him as well. I mean, it's a good move for him. Gets him out of the current environment that he's currently in, but he does get decent playing at time at Tottenham, so I think he would be all right staying too. And this is the last one we're going to move over here with the former Manchester City player. His contract has officially ended, and it's rumored that David Silva is going to be signing with Lazio to join Immobile. What do you think about this one, Tyler?
Wow. So I was pretty convinced that David Silva was going to go to the MLS for a little while. I thought, we talked about Luis Suarez and how he would fit with Inter Miami. I thought David Silva was going to be the man to do that for Beckham, and that it would be perfect. But I actually like this a lot better. I think David Silva still has a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and he's incredibly smart on the field. And Lazio is a great fit. It's not the English Premier League, but it's still they're still qualified for Champions League. So he still plays in a lot of relevant games, and he's got a guy in Ciro Immobile who's coming off the best season of his career, led the Italian league in goals. He was actually, I think he led the world in goals this year. And in terms of goals per game or per minute, however you want to look at that stat, he was only second to only Robert Lewandowski, which is saying a lot, right? So Immobile is pretty much scoring at will, and you add a guy like David Silva to help provide more opportunities for him. I think it's a flourish either way. I think it makes Lazio as a team better. I think it makes Immobile as a player better, and that's something that I would be very excited to see.
Absolutely. I think so as well. David Silva is one of those just great technical players. When you think of the technical players, you think of David Silva, Xavi, Iniesta, those guys.
Yeah.
I do think the pace of the Premier League is a little bit – it's not even tough on him because, I say it's tough on him because, it's quicker pace. He's not the fastest guy, but his decision-making is what also makes him fast in a different regard. Yep. So while his actual physical sprinting ability may not be the fastest, the cleverness that he has when it comes to his mentality and how he looks at the game is just second to none. So I think that adding another creative element to help Immobile create those opportunities and score more goals would be great for Lazio. And Lazio had a good run in the Serie A, and I think that's a pretty big transfer. It's definitely not like a crazy long-term option, but, for David Silva, he's kind of only looking at a year-to-year basis, I feel like, at this point. Yeah. So I think that'd be a great transfer for him. So a lot of good things to say there. So yeah, that's our flop and flourish segment. There's a lot that we went over, a lot that we covered. If there's anything that that we missed from the German league, feel free to let us know. Do you feel any different for our flops and flourishes? Do you think Suarez going to Inter Miami would actually be a good deal for him? Let us know below. So Tyler, I'll just leave it off with you. Anything you'd like to leave us off on?
Yeah, I also just want to mention we're going to do the same thing next week, but for the Italian league. So if there's anything you guys want to hear from us specific to that, let us know, and we'll make sure we touch on it. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Again, make sure you guys all follow us, Instagram, Spotify, Facebook, and YouTube. YouTube, you can see our beautiful faces. Spotify, you hear our wonderful voices. And the rest of the social media is very informative. So definitely give us a follow or a like on those pages, and let us know what your thoughts are. And we look forward to keeping everybody engaged and keeping the content coming.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that. So, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me over here. It's always a pleasure to talk transfers with you. Next week's going to be another good week as we break down the Italian league, and there's been a lot of hot rumors, so I have a feeling confirmed transfers might be a pretty big topic for us next week. I'm going to leave off with a little cliffhanger here with you real quick. One last quick hitter. Do you think Kai Havertz signs with Chelsea this year, or does he stay? I know I ask you this every other week, but I just got to see if this changes.
I think he goes to Chelsea.
Oh, it does change.
I think he does.
No,
I think he does. Change. I Leverkusen didn't make it, man, to Champions League. I think it's time for him to move on. And I hate to say that because I like Leverkusen, but I think it's time for him to move on.
I think if he would have got one more year at Leverkusen, I think he would have gone to Bayern.
Yeah, I agree that if he I still think that if he stays one more year at Leverkusen and ends up being on his last year of his contract going into next summer, I think Bayern breaks the bank for him. I really do. And I would love to see that.
If any player you're going to break the bank for, it's probably him.
Yeah, well, we chose Leroy Sané over him this year, so that was the difference. And I'm okay with that because of Mueller's success, I'm okay with that. So I think for Havertz, I think it's better for him to go to Chelsea. But if he does stay 1 year, I'm not going to be upset about it at all because go Bayern, baby. Mia San Mia.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we will catch you guys all next week.
See ya.
Can't stop it.